Have you ever thought about going on the carnivore diet? If so, be ready for all the propaganda and lies. There's a lot of that floating around in the mainstream. For one, carnivore diet causes diabetes. Carnivore diet causes cancer. The carnivore diet will ruin the earth because of all the cows farting us out of existence. Anyway, today I would like to go over the top 5 lies about the carnivore diet, right here on the Carnivore Science Channel. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Let's just start off with carnivore myth number 1. Carnivore will cause diabetes. There's no planet on which that makes any kind of sense, because overconsumption of carbohydrates for extended periods of time, which cause insulin resistance, is what causes diabetes. This is well known that people who eat garbage for years and years and years, sugars and cakes and pies and cookies and processed food, end up with diabetes. Not people who don't eat carbs. I don't even understand how people are even entertaining this, even for a tiny minute. It makes absolutely no sense. Yet you keep hearing it over and over and over again. When you go look at the American Diabetes Association, they have pie recipes on their homepage. I do have a theory about this. I think that the food industry feeds the pharmaceutical industry, and what they feed them are patients. So you have a little treadmill of, you make the patients, you treat the patients, you make the patients, you treat the patients. That's my theory. Whether or not you have a bunch of people sitting around conspiring to actually propagate this myth, I can't say. But still, it is dumb to think that meat would cause diabetes. That makes absolutely no sense. And it doesn't make sense to anybody that ever took biochemistry. So, no, carnivore diet does not cause diabetes. Carnivore diet myth or lie number 2. If you go on the carnivore diet, you're going to get scurvy. Because there's so many people walking around with scurvy right now. That's a huge Oh wait, it's not. Yeah. Okay, so if you eat 2 pounds of fresh muscle meat, you will have enough vitamin C. How about that? Would never thought that, would you? And on top of that, another just fun fact is that if you do not eat carbohydrates, which we carnivores do not, then you don't need hardly any vitamin C at all. Because part of the reason you need the vitamin C is because you eat carbohydrates. It's for carbohydrate processing. As a matter of fact, it acts a lot like insulin, according to some studies that I've read. So that explains that. It's the reason everybody's not walking around bleeding from the gums. So, no, carnivore diet will not cause you to have scurvy. Carnivore diet lie number 3. And yes, I'm going to call them lies because that's exactly what they are. Myth sounds too much like a fairy tale or something. It sounds too nice. Number 3 is the tough one. Carnivore diet causes heart disease. Now, this is actually the stupidest thing I've ever heard. The reason I think it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard is because the way it's treated is kind of like you eat fat and it's like little globules and it just floats around in your bloodstreams and just clogs everything up. where the only thing I see when I look at history and I look at how everything played out years and years ago, everybody was eating a lot of meat and they were eating a lot of animal fats. And you didn't have the obesity epidemic. You didn't have all of this chronic disease. However, when you look back in history and you see when Crisco was developed and everybody's talking about vegetable oils and nobody's eating any kind of animal fat, when you look around, you see that the graphs, everything starts to graph upward together. The food being processed and all of these frankenfoods and industrial lubricants that everybody started eating, it graphs up with the heart disease and the chronic disease. Everything started to go to crap. As a matter of fact, and this is just anecdotal, but I have eyeballs. I can see things. I can actually make conclusions from what I see because I'm a thinking person. The Apollo launch in the 70s, if you look at that footage, they panned the crowd. This is in the 70s, sometime in the 70s. The entire crowd looked like stick people. Everybody was super thin. Then, about, in the 2000s, maybe 2005, 2006, I can't remember. They did some kind of launch in the same area. They panned the crowd. It is exactly the opposite. Everybody is overweight. It is so hard to actually find even a percentage of the population that is not overweight. Everybody is getting fatter and sicker. Chronic disease is exploding. So, if eating red meat was going to cause you to have heart disease, then you would have seen more heart disease when more people ate red meat instead of seeing more heart disease when everybody was eating cardboard chicken breast in the 90s. Instead, it is the opposite. So, don't really need a clinical trial to figure this one out. It's something we can see for ourselves. So, no, carnivore diet does not cause heart disease. Lie number 4. The cows are going to fart us out of existence and kill the planet. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So, it doesn't even need to be debunked because it's dumb. Animals fart and they've been on the planet for ever. So, what do you want to do? Kill all the animals? I don't even understand. I don't even understand why the existence of cows threaten Armageddon. I'm done. I'm finished with that one. No, we are not going to become extinct because cows are farting. Okay? Myth, lie number 5. Carnivore diet doesn't have any fiber, so you're probably going to get cancer and you're never going to poop again. Did you know that a lot of people who have IBS, like severe IBS, go to their doctors to try to get help? And do you know what they're told? They're told to eat a fiber-rich diet. Sometimes, depending on the doctor, I guess. And did you know that most of those people still have IBS and still have problems and still have horrible trouble with their digestive tracts? Yet they keep going back and their doctor keeps telling them to eat enough fiber. You gotta eat fiber, you gotta eat fiber. Back in the 60s, 70s, there were a group of people who were looking at fiber, a group of physicians who actually did some research. And later, that research was published in something called the Fiber Revolution. This was a little pamphlet. It was like a little propaganda pamphlet that was actually put out by Prevention Magazine. And it actually caused a big stir, like everybody was talking about fiber and, oh my goodness, fiber, it just goes through you and cleans you out like a giant Brillo pad and it's great. The reason people looked into that is because back then everybody was constipated and miserable. But the problem is that nobody asked the question, why is everybody constipated and miserable? Instead, you had a bunch of doctors get together to look into things, and they were actually looking at some things that were pretty noble. They actually were trying to pursue some kind of cure for colorectal cancer, but and a lot of them didn't agree on the entire fiber thing, but one of them in particular went to Africa and observed tribes that were crapping like buffalo and just envious because these people were just crapping their brains out, and it's so great that they were doing that. And he noticed what they were eating, and they were eating very fibrous foods. And this is in Africa. This is like a niche area. This is a place where, they didn't have a McDonald's on every corner. They weren't eating a bunch of processed food. So, I mean, it's a completely different petri dish of things going on as compared to the United States, where everything was just beginning to be super processed, and you had all these seed oils. This fiber revolution pamphlet that came out, and the work these people did ended up blowing up, and everybody's talking about fiber, and you got to have fiber. And for whatever reason, we believed after this point that we had to eat fiber, something that we cannot digest. We don't have the digestive system. We don't have a fermenter digestive system to even break this down. That we have to have this stuff, this Brillo pad stuff, like running through us and pooping in order to poop. Which, granted, it'll make you poop, but why couldn't you poop in the first place? So when you hear people talk about the carnivore diet, other people are like, oh my gosh, but you're going to be constipated. And then if you happen to tell them how often you go to the bathroom, because there's not a lot of waste, because everything is used by the body because it's useful. It's not garbage. It does not have to be expelled and thrown away. So you don't poop as much. And so everybody's like, oh my God, you don't poop as much. Because everybody just got used to like crapping like buffalo. If you're not crapping like buffalo like 3 times a day, I guess there's something wrong with you. No, that's not normal. You should not have to do that. We can't do anything with fiber. And the idea that it's just going through our system and cleaning everything out like it's a sponge or something, that is not the case. And in fact, it really makes a lot of people with IBS and like people who had their bowels removed or their intestines removed, it makes their condition a lot worse. I've seen a lot of accounts of people giving their testimony at how their doctors told them to eat a certain way, and they would eat all this stuff, and it would make them worse every time. Then they would go back, they would get a medication for the IBS, and they would take the medication would mitigate sometimes it wouldn't. And they would keep eating like their doctors told them to. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing or listening to the same people over and over and over again and having disastrous results. That's all I can say. But no, you do not need fiber. The carnivore diet does not make you constipated. Now, caveat to that. In the beginning, if you go from standard American diet to a carnivore diet, you are going to have some digestive upset. As a matter of fact, I had 3 weeks of explosive diarrhea from hell. Some people get somewhat constipated. It just depends on your gut microbiome, because it took you probably 20, 30 years to screw all that up in there. So it's going to take longer for you to fix it. Just remember that. If you start the carnivore diet, remember it's going to be a rough, rocky road. I will do a video on all of the tips and tricks to help you actually transition if you are thinking about going carnivore, and to give you advice on how to do it. Because cold turkey, if your standard American diet, is going to be rough, I can tell you that. But long term, does it make you constipated in the long term? No, it doesn't. It does not. And I don't even have a gallbladder, and I have no problems now. In the beginning, though, yeah, Montezuma's revenge from hell, big time. So fair warning. But no, you will not be constipated forever. And you don't have to have fiber. That's a lie. Bonus round. I wanted to add 2 more things to the list, even though I said it's 5 things that we're talking about here. One of the things that's often said about the carnivore diet is that it's expensive. And while I'll give you that, meat is very expensive. It's not expensive if you look at your entire grocery cost. If you're by yourself, for instance, let's just to make it simple, and you want to do the carnivore diet, guess what you don't have to buy anymore? Flour, sugar, canned foods, mixes, sauces, rice, potatoes, produce. I mean, look at all of that. Think about that for a minute. Think about all the crap that you used to buy. And then think about, ground beef or something. If you get 4 or 5 pounds of ground beef, I mean, that's going to last you a little while. Several days. I mean, you don't have to use all of these ingredients to make all of this food. I mean, think about all the things you have to buy to actually make dinners and stuff. And it ends up actually being cost efficient. And I'll tell you how I do things. I get a whole rack of beef. Like I'll get a rack of beef at Sam's, like ribeye, because I love ribeye. Ribeye is my favorite food. I'll get like a huge chunk of it, and I cut it myself. It is way cheaper if you get a big chunk of it and you cut it yourself, and I can slice the steaks as thin or as thick as I want to. And say I spend, I don't know, $100 and something for $150, like depending on how big it is, right? I can get a ton of steaks. I end up spending about or spending about per meal, because I'll eat 1 steak per meal, and these are thick enough to where that does me fine. 1 steak per night, and it's maybe, I don't know, $8. I mean, you can't get better than that, especially for a steak. And then if you have ground beef's even cheaper, and I eat ground beef half of the time. But I mean, a huge pack of ground beef will do me for a while. Put everything in the freezer, just defrost it, and it's super fast. I don't have to ever think about what I'm having for dinner. It's very simple. This brings me to the second point I wanted to make. The carnivore diet is too boring. It's too restrictive. You can look at it that way. If you are in the midst of the standard American diet, you probably are right for thinking that. Compared to the Pringles and the Reese Cups and the pies and cakes and everything else that you're eating, sure, it's probably true. It's a true statement. I mean, if you compare the two. But the problem is that what you're eating is not food. You're addicted to substances. You're addicted to concoctions that are made in a laboratory. It's not food. It is not meant for you to put in your mouth. That is not something that you should do. It is very harmful to your body. For instance, cakes, pies, anything that you bake. Guaranteed brominated flour. Bromine is very bad. It is very toxic to your body. When I actually detoxed from bromine, it hurt. It was painful for an entire week. I went through pain and suffering trying to get that out of my body. I did so by taking iodine. But it's very bad. It's very detrimental to your body. So you have to look at it that way if you're going to actually change anything. If you keep eating the standard American diet, the only thing in your future is chronic disease, sickness, illness, and obesity. So when you look at what's boring or not boring, should we really be celebrating and rallying around the dinner table all the time? Should we focus on food like we do? Think about it. In a day, what do? If you're a standard American diet, I know I used to be, you get up in the morning and you're thinking about what you're going to have for breakfast. I'm going to go to McDonald's and I'm going to get a McGriddle. God, I love those. It's actually like pancakes, and they bake in the syrup into the actual little pancakes, and it's got egg and bacon and cheese. Think about how you actually fantasize over something like that, or whatever it is. You really want that. And the second thing, and you do it for lunch and then you do it for dinner. You spend all the hours after lunch, well, you spend all the hours after breakfast thinking about lunch, and then you spend all the hours after lunch thinking about dinner. We're consumed. We're obsessed with all of this food. If you think about it, that's not natural. And also, people like to say, oh, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. You know, I don't think that most people none of the people I work with know what hunger is. They've never been hungry probably a day in their life. The professional people I work with, like, they have never been hungry a day in their life. I can guarantee everybody that I know personally has never known what hunger felt like. You might know what hunger feels like if you fast, but when you are on the standard American diet, you're craving like a junkie. You're jonesing for another hit. You are not, in most cases, hungry. You have to have another hit, just like any other junkie. That's just the way it is. So, if you look at it that way, it's about breaking addiction when you actually convert to the carnivore diet. It's an elimination diet. It helps a lot of people get rid of all kinds of chronic illnesses and get rid of extra weight. But it also is the perfect solution for food addicts. So given that, no, it's not too expensive to go on the carnivore diet, and nobody has to eat top of the line prime ribeyes and things like that every day. A lot of people go to the lion diet and they go straight for the red meat because it is the least inflammatory, even though that's probably lie number 6. I've heard that also, that red meat causes inflammation, which is stupid. Again, not even worth debating that. Because if it was so inflammatory, why are all these people curing their inflammation with the carnivore diet? That makes no sense. And if you are on the lion diet, that is the best diet to eliminate any type of inflammatory substances. It is the least inflammatory if you actually do the red meat, salt and water thing. I hope this has been beneficial, and I hope this answers questions that you might have about the carnivore diet. Do your own research, look into it for yourself, but do not buy into all of the propaganda. There is a huge push in this country for people to stay away from meat, to go vegan, to consume only vegetables, all that kind of thing. But you have to understand where it's coming from and why there is pushback to all of this. But it doesn't change the facts of human existence and what we've been doing for forever, which is eating meat. So thanks guys for being here. If you please hit the like button. And if you want to subscribe, please subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video.